Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Madison Realty Capital, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, AmTrust Title, Ariel Property Advisors, Customers Bank, Capital One Bank, Meridian Capital Group. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handler Real Estate Organization Handro Properties, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Castamatidis Red Apple Group, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Matone Group, Mercantile Bank, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Stonehenge NYC, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Merengoff Family Foundation, the Moynihan Organization, Moynihan Capital Partners, and these friends. Residential housing, New York City and New Jersey, what's happening? Who's renting? Where are the people coming from? What are the deals? What are we really seeing today in the market? Because the press sometimes makes the market say it's terrible, but I don't believe it's that way, and I don't believe my guests believe it that way. So I've identified 4 individuals today who will talk about the residential market. My guests today include Enrique Alonso, Executive Vice President of SJP Properties, Martin Nussbaum, Principal of Slate Property Group, Eli Weiss, Principal at Joy Construction, and last but not least, Jeffrey Levine, who is the Chairman and CEO of Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Clinton Management, and more important, a true friend and mensch. So what's happening? Most of these guys are younger than you and I, okay? After all these years, is it still pay to be in the residential rental business and the condo business?
Well, first, I have to wish you a happy and healthy, good new year, everybody here.
Right, okay, but?
Second, it'll be too late when you see this, but I voted today and everybody should vote.
Yes, definitely.
Third, the rental business is a great business. I once heard Sam Lefrak say that it's like being a farmer, except the crop comes in every month. The reality is the rental business is a difficult business. You have to, if you don't simply buy it, you have to develop it, you have to finance it, and you have to go through the stabilization process. Because it's more difficult than condos, because easy money chases the condos, the rental money is harder to find.
But everyone sitting here has been or is involved with the condo for sale business also, correct? To a different level, okay?
So was I, but then I reached an age of enlightenment.
No, okay, you saw the bright lights came down. You have a rental in Fort Lee, and you have for sale in Manhattan on the west side. You're all around the borough, correct?
Yes.
Are you in the Bronx yet?
No.
Okay. He remembers the Bronx many years ago. You're active in the Bronx over there. And you're still Brooklyn. And this big new development over there at 601 West 29th Street, I believe, which is like how many units?
940.
940. So who's going to be renting? Eli, who's renting in your properties? We were talking before. What's the nature? Where are the people coming from? What nationality? Are they students? Are they doctors? Is it the healthcare? Where are the people coming from today?
Yeah, sure. So I've just finished leasing 411 West 35th Street, the Lewis, which is on 35th between 9th and 10th. And then I'm in the process of leasing its sister building, 445 West 35th Street. In total, it's 304 apartments. I would say 70% of my tenancy has been international students.
So your building, in a way, has become a form of a dormitory.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that all of us, when we start today building product, look to small units. So it sort of backs into that demographic naturally. And then I think the cost of dormitories and the lack of supply on the dorm side has led people who are, looking at a dormitory as an option to looking to rent an apartment and potentially even get a better deal with more amenities.
And you, Martin?
I think it's very project specific and location specific for us, because we can do projects that are really meant for younger generation, 20 to 25-year-olds, and can go up to people who are pied-à-terres looking for pied-à-terres. So I think it's very specific to location.
So try to give me
so for example,
insight.
We have a project on 54th Street between First and Sutton where we have generated a unit mix that allows for studios that are as small as 350 square feet, where obviously we're having younger professionals coming in, to apartments that are 2,000 square feet, 3-bedroom apartments that are families or pied-à-terres, people selling their homes. So I think we have a very unique mix in that project. Whereas right now we're leasing up about 500 apartments in Brooklyn in various different neighborhoods.
Who's moving into downtown Brooklyn? I know you're also working on a project
in Clinton Hill.
Right.
So we have a project about 185 apartments in downtown Brooklyn. We just opened up our leasing probably like 2-3 weeks ago. And we're seeing young professionals. We're seeing 25 to 35-year-old individuals, some married couples, but more frequently sort of individual people who are living and generally working in the Brooklyn area. And then in Clinton Hill, our property is about 120 apartments, and it's on Pratt University's campus, basically like on the outside of it, looking in. And there we're seeing a lot of young professionals and a lot of young students that are almost using it as dormitory housing.
So you're really Generation X.
Yeah, 100%.
And you?
So our most recent rental project, which you mentioned, the Modern in Fort Lee, just across the GW Bridge. We have 900
and truly
units.
the most modern building in Fort Lee, which they hadn't been building for about 30 years.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's 900 units. We built it to New York condo style finishes. It's got 70,000 feet of amenities in each building. So we're getting a number of different demographics. You're getting some students, some that go to Columbia. You're getting empty nesters from Bergen County and other parts of New Jersey who want to, sell their house and come live in an amenitized building. And you're getting people from Manhattan also that want to live in a great building, but at half the rent and with better views.
Now, how has the shuttle bus helped you with regard to getting tenants?
A lot. I mean, the shuttle's been, it's packed every morning. We're on a private shuttle from the building to the express subway station across the bridge. Everybody uses it because most of the people in the building actually do work in Manhattan. So.
And why would someone pick your neighborhood versus Jersey City or Hoboken or other parts of Jersey specifically?
Yeah, no, I think you have the building helps. It's actually, a better building that you would find in any other of those markets you mentioned. There's no building quite built to that standard. And, people that are from Bergen County kind of want to stay in the area. Jersey City, you're getting a lot of people from downtown, kids, probably a younger crowd. We have a lot of Asian demographic as well in Fort Lee that wants to stay in that area.
Slightly more residential and suburban as you move up to Bergen County, where
that makes sense.
Right.
if you're already leaving Manhattan or Brooklyn, you have a little bit more of a suburban feel.
And what do you have coming into your properties besides, the students?
So I think looking back, I've been in the market rate rental business for about 8 years. Brooklyn, Manhattan. When I did my first projects on 37th between 9th and 10th and 3rd Avenue and 12th Street, there was a disproportionate amount of...
They didn't even call it the Hudson Yards.
No, it was just 37th between 9th and 10th. It had no name. But you had a disproportionate amount of people working in the financial sector. I think that's dropped tremendously. And I don't think it's dropped because that sector has decreased in terms of employment. I think you just see a lot of different sectors that have come to New York, a lot more creative, a lot of jobs that I didn't even know existed 4 or 5 years ago. I think the modern economy and technology have created job classes that we didn't think about 5 years ago.
And what about your 2 properties that you have in the rentals in Williamsburg?
I agree with what was just said. In the days of old, New York was all about finance, insurance, and real estate. Today, the shift has been in the younger generations to the tech, the TAMI, the STEM, all of these younger professionals, and they're looking for a different living experience. Williamsburg has been a great neighborhood with all sorts of the kind of social and cultural amenities that this generation, which is not Generation X, because frankly, they are looking for better housing opportunities, meaning cheaper spaces.
That's right.
It's the people who are willing to spend for the luxury building, for the amenities, for the convenience, for the social services, whether it's the coffee shops, the cheese shops, the type of restaurants. We used to say in the Upper East Side, your residents who were the baby boomers and now approaching 65 and 70 wanted the Italian Continental, the French gourmet. These young people want their burgers and they want their Asian food and their other amenities that are available to them in these newer wave neighborhoods.
Now, are the apartments today that all of you are building being absorbed at the perceived nature? What's the reality of what's happening today?
So in the case of Fort Lee, our first tower we were given 2 months free on the lease up. And once it leased up, now we started the lease up on the second tower. We actually gone down, reduced it to 1 month on the new tower and no concession on the first tower. So we're actually going the other way. I know in Manhattan's been a little bit different, and Brooklyn as well. People have been, with all the supply coming on, there's been more concessions.
Yeah, I think it depends on if you're in the middle of a lease up, how many units you're trying to lease. I think it's a strategy you have to implement, again, building by building. There are buildings that we have that are stabilized. We're not offering much. On renewals, we're not offering anything. If we have 185 apartments to lease in, it's either going to sit vacant or I'm going to offer 1 month, 2 months. There's a certain inflection point at which you're not going to offer more, but I think it really depends on where you are in terms of your lease up. And, on new lease up projects right now, we'll offer 2 months on a 12-month lease. We'll offer 3 on a 24. We'll offer what we need to offer to a certain point. And once you achieve a certain occupancy, then you start scaling back. And I think importantly, what we're seeing now is on our renewal side, we're not having to offer as much as what we've had to in the last 24 months. So in the past where we were offering 1 month free, even on a renewal of an existing tenancy, that's definitely dialing back a little bit, which is reassuring that we sort of have maybe met a point in the market where we stabilize a little bit and we know where our rents are going to be on a net effective basis.
With regard to transportation, Fort Lee, you have the bus, which is very helpful. How important are the ferries today and the other means of transportation, the chariot buses, the chariot cars that are taking people around for your tenants?
Well, commutation time to employment is critical as to where people decide to live. That, coupled with the other amenities that people look for in the community, make the whole package. In Brooklyn, the reason that I was driven to Williamsburg was, as we all know, the L train. The L train was a welcome point for many people that wanted to live in the culture of Brooklyn, but have opportunity to work easily in Manhattan. Obviously, we're being challenged now by the L train closure. I am also offering concessions because I'd rather have my buildings full going into the L train closure. And talking about the ferries, I sincerely believe that because we built over 2,500 units on the Williamsburg waterfront, we built the ferry piers. New York City is going to be running supplemental ferries from Williamsburg directly across the East River to Stuyvesant Cove, and then run shuttle buses to connect with every subway in Manhattan. So I really believe that the reality will be a lot better than the rhetoric that we're hearing now. But again, you have to lock the people in, just as in any new development. We're building 554 units in our most recent building. We're 80% occupied. I want it to be 100% before the L train closes, because I know that once people are in there, they will enjoy it. Exactly.
Right. And I think the question is, as Martin said and Jeff said, when you're leasing up, it's really binary. You're either offering concessions to move people in, or how much of your interest reserve are you using, and it's really the same thing at the end of the day.
Let's change the focus now, and let's go to the for sale. You're building for sale. Why?
Obviously, I think overall, a lot of supply out there right now, but there's certain submarkets that are supply constrained, and we feel good about those markets. We're very picky. We don't have a fund where we have to put money to work. So when we find a good deal in a good supply constrained market like the Upper West Side, we go for it, and that's the case with 200 Amsterdam. I think there's other markets like that as well. West Village, obviously, It's very supply constrained, so if you can find a good site there at a basis that works, you would do it. I think Fort Greene, where Jeff is building, is another market like that. I think we're going to do great there.
Martin, are you doing any for sale?
Yeah, we are. I mean, so we have a project in downtown Brooklyn that we have on the market actively now that we've been selling for the last.
Is that 10 Evans?
It's 10 Evans, called Brooklyn Grove. It's about 180 apartments, and we've done very well there. We're not priced at a very high level. We're priced at what we would view at a reasonable number.
What's reasonable?
$1,350 a foot, $1,400
With
a
the
net
tax
foot.
abatement?
With the tax abatement, and I think a smaller units. Again, so we're not looking for larger units. I
So
think
you're looking
everyone's
for the first-time homeowner who
100%.
wants to have something
correct.
in a reasonable price market.
And we have another project that we're going to be going to market in, like a boutique building of about 35 units in Greenpoint, that we think is going to do very nicely. And there we're going to do a little bit bigger of a unit where it's a little bit more family-oriented. And again, I think it's very price point driven and very sort of lump sum driven, and we're focused on staying beneath certain numbers in Brooklyn. And in Manhattan, we're doing a small Upper West Side conversion. There'll be another 35 units, and again, staying at sort of well below what sort of everyone's needs to underwrite if you're buying a piece of land today. We're not buyers and trying to sell out anything north of $2,500 a foot. It's just not the space we've ever been in.
Eli?
I still have about 6 units left on a project I did in Tribeca with HFC Capital, 11 Beach Street, where we converted a 123,000 square foot office building to residential. I personally am trying to become enlightened, like Mr. Levine. Most of my background is affordable housing, both in the public sector and the private sector. To me, rental housing is a necessity, and for sale housing, even whether it be luxury or not luxury, it's still a luxury. People don't need to own their homes. If you look at, traditionally having a home, you don't need to own it. And New York has traditionally been a renter's city. I look at demographics. To me, condo projects look fantastic on Microsoft Excel. And you just never end. You
just
keep
got to
adding a
change
tab.
the revenue stream.
Right.
It works great.
Exactly. You just keep adding tabs to the model. So for me, I'm much more comfortable in rental housing. I'm much more comfortable owning what we have. It's much more tax efficient.
And you?
Well, I think my enlightenment came from my experiences.
Right.
I've waxed rich in condominium development, and I've waxed poor in condominium development. And I realized that as good as I may be at executing the process of development, nobody can anticipate what the world is going to do in terms of its economics, its interest rate, its psychology, its security. So I don't want to bet on good luck and good fortune. I like to bet on a capability of doing these projects. Going back to the Great Recession, which is now the 10-year anniversary almost to the day, I was building a large luxury condo, and I was building a large luxury rental. The luxury rental, which was the Ohm in West Chelsea, I looked like a genius. I missed my market rents by 20%, but I made more money by accident than it would have made on purpose because interest rates was kept so low by the federal government, and my rate was tied to a floating SIFMA rate for a municipal bond offering, and I did great. At the same time, I was doing 600 condominium units, and guess what? Nobody was buying because the psychology left the building. So I recognized that in a rental building, it's not a perishable product like a condominium, and you can survive a drought or a freeze. Whereas in a condo building, if they don't buy it when you build it, the VIG on the equity, on the debt, will eat you up and spit you out. And if that doesn't get you, the maintenance on the unsold units will bury you.
Right.
Well, prior to the show, we were discussing senior housing. What's your thoughts about senior housing, all of you? I mean, because in many aspects, the modern has a large number of seniors also. People who have downsized, who want to remain in the community.
We wouldn't call it quite senior housing, but there is empty nesters and an older population
I'm talking
as well.
about luxury senior
I look, the demographics make sense. I get the business model. We haven't studied it deeply, but I can see why it's going to work, and it's going to continue to get better and better because baby boomers, getting older and.
Be careful.
Yeah.
And you're seeing, great buildings now that are being turned to senior housing.
I think that I understand the business model. I understand how it makes sense. I just don't personally, I haven't studied it in fairness. I don't know how deep the market is for it. So I'd be curious to see how much there is.
I think with the number of people who live in New York, the number of people who are coming back, I think you can absorb it.
I'm looking at the pricing of some of the buildings that have traded, and the land that's traded for this specific, like the nursing home and facilities and health, there are
I'm not talking
variations.
nursing. I'm talking true senior housing.
True senior housing.
Okay, I can talk to this subject because I built the 2 largest assisted and independent living facilities in New York, going back, I guess, about 20, 25 years ago in partnership with Atria.
Right.
I sold that at some point, but my flavor of the business took me out to Arizona, where over the last 30 years, I own and built and operate about 1,500 units of assisted and independent living. I love the business because it's a difficult business, and I'm a glutton for punishment. I like difficult businesses. It's intensive labor. Remember, it's not only housing, it's hospitality.
It's a
and
hospitality business.
and health. And the reality is, it's becoming more and more difficult now because labor costs in this country are going up by regulation.
Right.
But if you can achieve a price point that's affordable to the seniors, well, then there's a huge demand because, as you said, but it's not, the baby boomer is really not the market yet. The baby boomers, which started in 45, are approaching 70. We're aging better, and you don't need the type of independent assisted living services
The
until
specific-
you're 80.
right now.
So in the future, it's going to get even better, but you have to be positioned to take advantage of that. And that's something I'm trying to do now.
Brookdale Senior Living recently sold their building in Battery Park City for an outrageous price. But there was no senior housing in Battery Park City. The former Esplanade on the west side was sold over there. And I do believe, as you say, it's not the senior, it's the elder. It's an 80-year-old, 82-year-old who's moving in there. But people want to move there. And the affiliations with the medical centers and all the rest, they want to be with the best health care.
I have to tell you something. We become a tale of two nations, as you know, the red states and the blue states. Blue states, with their liberal social programs, make it much easier for seniors to age in place in housing very often, which is subsidized or stabilized housing. So whereas in Arizona or Texas or Nevada, the seniors business, the community doesn't provide the type of pickup and drop-off service, the type of Medicare service that we experience here in New York. And for that reason, and the fact that it's a more moderate cost to build, I build and furnish assisted living facilities in Arizona for a total cost to create of under $200,000 a unit. You can't do that in New York, and the people
It's a different
talking
world.
about it in New York are talking about getting $15,000 to $20,000 a month a unit.
That's the question I have, is like, how deep is that market?
Exactly.
Right? And we're talking about, senior housing outside of the New York City market. That's a very different conversation.
Correct.
But in New York City, the trades that we've seen and the pricing metrics that you have to achieve in order to justify those numbers, it's a big number. And I'm unclear about how deep that market is. There's a market for it, clearly.
They're outbidding luxury to condo developers on
Yes.
sites and buildings.
I would echo what Jeff said in the sense that the red state, blue state, except I see it a little differently. I think that you're going to see a major shift in demographics based on the new tax code with the SALT, the state and local tax. And I think you could see a lot of elderly people, because of the estate tax, leave New York State, because even though the estate tax at the federal level went up in terms of the exemption, actually New York got worse. They're raising the exemption to match the federal level to the 5.4 million, the old one. But after that, you lose the entire exemption. So I think you're going to see, both on the homeownership side, at the senior side, I think we're in the first and second inning of a major change that this tax code is going to impact.
Okay, with regard to a major change, not on the tax code, everybody's talking about Queens and the Bronx. Since you're involved in the Bronx, what's your thoughts about the Bronx?
The Bronx,
Jeff has been involved with the Bronx, since the dinosaur age.
I think the Bronx goes back to the conversation about transportation, right? I mean, at some point, as things expand in New York City, as population expands, people take the subway. I don't drive a car. I take the subway everywhere I go. And so the reality is, I go to my sites in the Bronx, I'm there in 40 minutes. And people have to move somewhere, and the cost of land is as such where you can develop there. And there's a usual pattern that both Jeff and I have seen, have known each other from the public sector and the private sector, is it starts with affordable housing, and then it moves to middle income housing, and it moves to market housing, and then you go to the community board, and they don't want affordable housing anymore. But what you're seeing now in the Bronx is 20 years of people like Jeff and people like Ron Moelis who've built affordable housing in the Bronx, and you're seeing that market mature, just like what happened in Harlem.
Listen, I'm building 600 units. I'm wrapping up right now in the Bronx over 149th Street
Right.
and Prospect and Southern. And frankly speaking, it's not yet ready for prime time. And again, the building blocks of the agencies, HPD, HDC,
Right.
EDC, improve these neighborhoods, improve the quality of life.
Right.
And very often when we come there and we develop affordable housing,
Right.
all of a sudden the negative elements, the criminals, the street people, don't want to be there because they don't like the light of day shown upon them.
Do we see market rate housing being built in Staten Island? Any of you?
I'm not in that market, and
Neither.
tough to get to because I take the subway everywhere.
As you know, exactly. Staten Island is an island, unlike Manhattan, which is not interconnected to the rest of the city other than by a few bridges. Yes, the ferry helps, and there may be more development at St. George where the ferry comes and goes from, but it is challenging in the long term. And we all know our good friend Don Kaposha is building the Empire Outlet stores over there. Our good friend Jeff File hopefully will get the wheel done, and the combination of all of these momentum. But you talk about Queens, we talk about the Bronx, and unfortunately I don't believe the Bronx is yet ready for prime time. You look at Queens, I remember building in Queens when Citicorp went up back in the late 70s, finished in the early 80s, and everybody said, well, this is the beacon for the future. But the reality is the economic cycle wasn't the wind behind its sail, and it stood there alone for 25
25 years, correct.
Until the rezoning facilitated all of this massive residential development. At some point, that will happen in the Bronx. When is a question.
Okay, maybe when you come back in a couple of months, we'll continue the discussion on the Bronx. So I'd like to thank Enrique, Martin, Eli, and Jeff, and I'll see you next week.